10 players have been rising up the fantasy football rankings the past few weeks, but should they be? Let's discuss each of these players and if their rise is actually warranted or not. And we'll start with the guy who's probably getting absolutely the most hype right now in OTAs and training camps coming up, and that's Rashod Bateman of the Baltimore Ravens. And it honestly makes some sense because a lot of things this offseason have gone his way. First, you could start with a couple of pieces of coach speak. You have his coach, Darren Harbaugh, all the way back in February here stating basically, this is from the Coach Speak Index, saying Bateman is going to have to take a big step forward this year. You could see right here, the ball's going to go his way a lot more. And then second-year offensive coordinator Todd Monken, who led to a more pass-friendly offense last year, said, I expect a tremendous year out of him this year. He said this just recently at the beginning of OTAs. And a lot of the offseason moves support this. First off, they picked up Bateman's fifth-year option since he was a future or former first-round pick a couple years back. And now Odell Beckham Jr. is gone from the team, which is just going to lead to more opportunity for Bateman to get on the field and earn targets. And as for how they replaced Odell, well, they really didn't. This is from the team changes page in the fantasy blueprint, which you can get linked down below. Just one of the few assets that you get, a ton of stuff in there. The only wide receiver they added in free agency was Deontay Hardy, probably more of a special teams player, definitely behind Rashod Bateman on this team. And the only guy they added in the NFL draft was a fourth-round pick, Devontae Walker out of UNC, and he's not really profiling out as a guy who's going to earn a lot of targets or get on the field right away. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot of people not wanting to go to Bateman because he's let you down in the past. He's had a frustrating 3-year career. If we look through his seasons, 2021 was his rookie year. He actually started that season injured. He ended up missing 5 games, was on the injury report for like half of them. 2022, he was actually having a good start to the year, a couple of big games, but he only plays 6 games because he ends the season with a Liz Frank injury to his foot. And then last year, the team signs Odell Beckham Jr. They give him a lot of money, so he has a significant role, and Bateman was also dealing with a hamstring injury. So all of this is frustrating, but if he could actually stay healthy this year, he's going to be in line to see a lot of competition. I mean, yeah, second-year player Zay Flowers is there. He was fine as a rookie for sure, but his role on what it could be, can he actually be a 30% target share guy? I am a little bit skeptical. Nelson Aguilar's there, not really somebody who's going to threaten for a lot of targets, maybe some snaps. Bateman on this team right now, when he's actually healthy and how he profiled that as a prospect coming out of college, probably the best route runner on the team. And if he could stay healthy, you can see at the top of the fantasy blueprint right here, I'll go to this view so you can see it a little bit better. He's currently going as the 197th overall player. That's the 17th round of fantasy drafts. For a lot of you, that'll be just your last round pick. And I think that's a fair spot to take a crack on him as somebody who can go in there with the reigning 2-time also and coming off of an MVP season, Lamar Jackson. They want to throw the ball more. As a starting receiver for him, not bad in the 17th round. And that 17th round ADP washes away some of those injury concerns and the fact that his first read target share last year was just 12%, which is pretty bad. But based on the film, it looked like he was not put in the best situations to win, and when he actually was, he still had solid and maybe even great film. Now, the next man up is going to be the Packers wide receiver Christian Watson, and a lot has been made this offseason about him and his hamstring recovery. And if you're not familiar with this saga, let me catch you up to speed. I found a really good Twitter thread to kind of walk through. Tyler Webb put out this Twitter thread. Basically, the NFL is trying to invest in guys coming back from these hamstring injuries because, you know, they lead to a worse product and they're good players being off the field. So, and you can scroll past some of this stuff, Mr. Christian Watson was one of those guys. You can see over his first couple of seasons, he's missed 11 games due to hamstring injuries right here. And if we just scroll down to what's most important, you can see he's tried everything. They say that massaging, dry needling, physical therapy, none of this stuff worked. But here's the key. He did some studies at the Wisconsin School of Medicine and he found out that one of his hamstrings was basically 20% weaker than the other one. And you can see that right here. There was a 20% difference in asymmetry, meaning one was just weaker than the other. So when you're pushing off on that one that's stronger, it's compromising the other one. So basically he spent a lot of time there and he's gotten it down now to being just an 8 to 10% difference, as you can see right here, which the normal, there's always going to be some sort of difference. So this is getting close to kind of a normal range. And he has like 3 more months to obviously get it closer to maybe like 4 or 5%. He said his goal was a 6% difference, which is absolutely fine. So maybe this can solve the Christian Watson hamstring injury. And in my opinion, if it does, and honestly, I don't see why it doesn't if you're putting in this much money into trying to solve something and you actually have found a problem, I think him going as the 77th overall player as like an 8th round pick in some fantasy drafts is just a steal. Because last season, Christian Watson was going as a 4th round pick based on what he did as a rookie with Aaron Rodgers. And the reason why there was some uncertainty around him was what would Jordan Love be? Well, now we know Jordan Love is great. And I get it. There are still the injury concerns. And we also now know that Jaden Reed is a pretty good receiver. So is Dontavian Wicks. So is, you could even say Bo Melton, who returns with the team. All these wide receivers, they have a ton of great pass catchers. The rookie tight end from last year. So yeah, there's maybe some more competition for Christian Watson. No, not you specifically, Romeo Dobbs. But Christian Watson himself is probably, in my opinion, still the most dynamic guy who can kind of see a 25+% target share. And he definitely has the best build and also the best athletic features when we're talking about speed and burst out of this entire receiver room. Now, last year was frustrating with injuries. He started the year hurt and he ended the year hurt. But when we actually saw this guy healthy last year, he was absolutely dynamic and nobody can guard him. From weeks 11 to 13, Watson averaged 19.4 fantasy points per game. games, 7.3 targets per game, and scored 4 touchdowns in 3 games. And when healthy, he led this Packers receiving core of a ton of young and talented wide receivers in first-read target share from Jordan Love. So I'm a fan of Watson in drafts right now. You can see on average he's going, and this is just from Fantasy Pros consensus, ADP average draft position, the 94th overall player. He's actually my 94th ranked player, so I don't have any difference here. I think he's a value at that point as an 8th or 9th or 10th round pick for sure right now, and I think he's only going to rise as the summer goes on, so get him now. Now let's move from a wide receiver to a running back. And it's actually going to be a running back room because as of right now, the Browns running backs, their backup running backs behind Nick Chubb, specifically Jerome Ford and a little bit of D'Onta Foreman, are rising up the rankings, but is it warranted? And also, why is this happening? It might seem odd to you since Nick Chubb is there until you remember that last season, Nick Chubb had a gruesome knee injury where basically everything in his knee sadly got torn or dislocated. And you can see right here, Draft Sharks is projecting a chance of injury for Chubb this year returning as an older back now at 74% for him to miss at least multiple games. And yeah, that's a concern. And it's also important to point out that they're projecting him to miss 3 games, but he's also in line to start the season on the PUP list, which means he would miss 4 additional games. So that's getting close to half the season that he could miss. And the knee injury is bad enough. And then it gets even worse when you remember that in 2015, he did something very similar where he tore his knee, he tore his ACL as well. You can see everything right here, PCL, an MCL, an LCL, the ACL as well. He also dislocated his knee back in 2015. This was an injury that at that time people said would end his career. Now he suffered it almost 10 years later again, and he's an older back. It makes it hard to see him coming back the same way. And again, this is just the medical information we have. This is not me trying to play Debbie Downer. I want the guy to come back. I want him to rush for 2,000 yards, have a great season, of course. But practically speaking, when we look at the fact that Nick Chubb has over 1,300 career touches in the NFL since suffering that injury all the way back in college 10 years ago, and now he suffered it again with all this mileage on him and an aging back, which takes longer to just recover naturally, it is a high concern. So this is where the rise for Jerome Ford is coming in. You can see he's going as the 128th overall player right now in drafts. He's been rising probably the last couple weeks, a half a round or so, and I actually still have him as a value. He's my 118th overall player. I'm about still around ahead of the ADP, even though it's rising on Ford. And he's going after guys like Ezekiel Elliott and Mike Williams, who Mike Williams might not even start the season healthy, has no timeline to return, 30-year-old receiver with the Jets now, coming off of his own ACL, so I think that's probably a mistake that he goes after Mike Williams. If you're not familiar with Jerome Ford, last year he actually had a pretty solid year. Once Nick Chubb went down, he was kind of this sleeper pick, and you can see right here between his rushing yards of over 800, receiving yards of over 300, he had 1,100 total yards. He was a top 25 running back in points per game, and he had a nice season of 45 catches as well. And now he wasn't elite in any one area, but he was solid to good in a lot of areas. Ford was top 20 in both yards created per touch and broken tackles last year. And this year he's going to benefit yet again from another solid offensive line in Cleveland. Even though a lot of guys are coming off of injury, it's probably still a borderline, if not definite, top 5 unit. And you can see that unit right here. You're going to get Jack Conklin returning from injury, Jedrick Willis returning from injury. I mean, these are the big pieces of the offensive line that they need to get back. You also still have Wyatt Teller there. This is one of the better offensive lines in the NFL, and really any running back will benefit behind it, especially one that showed over 1,100 total yards last year in Jerome Ford. But as I hinted at earlier, it's not just Jerome Ford, because I also think D'Onta Foreman's an interesting player if Nick Chubb was to miss the first 4+ weeks of the season or be limited for a lot of the season and potentially have a re-injury risk. D'Onta Foreman now as a top 2 back on this Browns team with a good offensive line becomes appealing. He signed a deal with the team this offseason. And he's in this backfield basically going undrafted in all drafts. If you play somewhere on Underdog where you're going to see close to 19, 20+ rounds, DraftKings best ball, he's going in like the 19th to 20th round right now, which is basically a free pick. And the reason I bring him up is because he's a veteran who showed success over the last few years, or at least a couple years ago. Last year he did battle injury. When healthy though, he was pretty successful at times with the Chicago Bears. And in 2022 with the Panthers, he saw a big workload. He had 17 games played, and he goes out there and when he actually starts to see a workload and Christian McCaffrey is no longer with the team, over 900 rushing yards. With his receiving yards, he's pushing towards 1,000 total yards, and he was effective. That season, he averaged 4.5 yards per touch. He was breaking a lot of tackles. So this is just a guy to keep in mind. Again, this is not you must draft this player, but just keep him in mind as the summer goes along. So overall, my verdict is that I think the rise on these guys is warranted, especially since the news on Nick Chubb and just the timeline is kind of getting known now from a lot of the fantasy industry as more people get back into it. Now, the next guy who's rising up the rankings takes us to this news that came out. Sean McVay a couple weeks ago in OTA says that Kyren Williams right here, he has a foot issue, which is something that we'll talk about has been kind of the case during his entire NFL career, and he's going to be ready for training camp, meaning that he'll miss the rest of OTAs, which the big thing there is what's going to happen with the new rookie running back behind him. And what's happening right now for that rookie running back out of Michigan, a 3rd-round pick, Blake Corum, is that he is rising up the fantasy rankings. Is this warranted? Well, before we get into that, let's add a little bit of context behind this Kyren Williams thing, because for instance, right now, why should we panic? He said he'll be ready for training camp. Let's just take him at his word. And for the most part, that's kind of the thing that I'm agreeing with. Let's just see what happens in training camp before we get all riled up. But it is important to point out that his entire NFL career career, Kyren Williams has dealt with a foot injury. He broke his foot in 2022. He then recovered from that in time for the regular season opener where he sprains his ankle, which is pretty common. The rest of your muscles are not as strong. Maybe your bones aren't as strong because you've been non-weight bearing for a couple of months with a fractured foot. Then you can see in 2023 also had an high ankle sprain as well. He's now had 3 foot injuries in like 2 years or so in the NFL. And then you factor in that last year, pretty much around this time, maybe a little bit later, Sean McVay was also pretty positive about Cooper Kupp, and we saw how that turned out. His ankle was not great. So those things are a little bit worrisome, but the Rams are probably the most conservative team in the NFL when it comes to not playing their guys in, say, the preseason, or if they get a little banged up in camp, they just let them sit out. So this shouldn't be too alarming because this is kind of status quo for the Rams. They don't take risks. But the thing I keep worrying about is the fact that he says it's just a little foot issue. I really want to know what a little foot issue is. They don't have to actually report the specifics right now, because is it a bone bruise? That can take 6 to 8 weeks to recover from, and then you have to get your weight bearing back. Is it plantar fasciitis? That can take 1 to 2 months to recover from, and then you have to get your weight bearing back. Or is it just some sort of rolled ankle that might just be 1 to 2 weeks, right? There's big differences in this stuff, so we'll see once training camp comes before we go all crazy speculating. And I get it, we're speculating now, but from a standpoint of, like, you know, moving Kyren Williams down the rankings a ton or something like that. So we talked about Blake Corum. They drafted him in the 3rd round. He's out of Michigan. He was in a ton of primetime games and national championships, so you probably maybe heard the name. And whether Blake Corum ends up seeing significant snaps or not down the stretch for the Rams and kind of steal some snaps from Kyren Williams, we can all agree that him seeing more snaps in OTAs with the first team offense is a good thing for his development. And there's a decent chance that Corum would have come out in the 2022 NFL draft, or the 2023 NFL draft, if he didn't have a knee injury at the end of the 2022 season, kept him in the league for college football 1 more year, and then he came out this past year. Anyway, if you're not familiar, this guy's had a lot of success in college over the past 3 seasons. 2022 was that big year. He had 1,400 yards, and that was while suffering an injury towards the end of the season. That's the year he probably would have came out. And then in 2023, he kind of started the year off of a knee injury, a little bit slower, less efficient, still ended the season with over 1,100 yards, and was just great for them in the playoffs and the conference championship. Now, where specifically does Blake Corum win? Well, let's discuss. Corum has elite agility and is great in between the tackles. His vision and his contact balance were probably some of the best in this draft class. And as of right now, Corum's going as like a 10th or an 11th round pick, the 124th overall player, right around where I have him drafted. So if he keeps rising a little bit more over these next couple of weeks, we'll see what happens with the training camp news on Kyren Williams. I might start to be out on him, but as of right now, I think for a guy who can slide into a 3-down role, he did it in college. If Kyren Williams was to miss time this year, and Kyren Williams has been hurt every year of his NFL career, I do think that this is an interesting player to take a stab on because he could have a massive upside piece to it. And even if Kyren Williams stays healthy, they've already been talking about giving Kyren Williams less snaps. They don't want to give him 85% of the snaps again, which means Corum each week could kind of see 8 to 12 touches and keep him relevant to pay off a 10th round price tag. And this is the exact mold of players I want to be targeting as RB2s. You want to look for the younger guys who are exciting, have production history either in the NFL or in college in the past. And if the starter goes down, this is the big one. If Kyren Williams was to go down, he could take on a full workload because there's no one else behind him. Now, the next man we have to talk about who is rising up fantasy rankings right now in draft boards is going to be Tyjae Spears, a Tennessee Titans 2nd-year running back. And right now there's a steady drumbeat out of Titans camp. Everybody's basically saying positive things about this guy. And Spears is coming off of a strong rookie season. He was basically the only person ever since like Derrick Henry's rookie year to split a backfield with Derrick Henry. Spears actually played over 50% of the snaps and took Henry off the field in a lot of situations. And in 2023, Spears averaged 5.5 yards per touch, which was 6th in the NFL. Coming out of college, this guy was known as a fantastic elite producer, a big playability guy, and that's exactly what he did in the NFL. His breakaway run rate right here was top 5 in the NFL of runs of 10 plus yards. And then his juke rate, his ability to break tackles per touch, was 4th. So this guy was breaking tackles, having breakaway runs. Overall, like we said, his yards per touch, 5.5. He was just extremely effective per touch. He could do anything he wanted last year when he got the ball. And things were looking good for him because Derrick Henry wasn't going to re-sign with the team. This was kind of known towards the end of last year. There was like a photo of Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill walking off together because they both figured they just played their last game as a Titan. And then in the offseason, the team goes out and signs Tony Pollard, the former Cowboy, to a 3-year deal, and they give him about $10.5 million guaranteed, which is a decent contract. It's nothing crazy over 3 years, but it's enough to mean that, yeah, Pollard's obviously going to be involved. He's still a young enough player at 27 to have a significant workload. But all offseason long, the steady drumbeat has stayed for Tyjae Spears that he's going to be highly involved. You could see right here, the new offensive coordinator, Nick Holtz, basically calls Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears interchangeable. And we've seen this all summer long. These guys are interchangeable. Yeah, we signed Tony Pollard, but Tyjae Spears, we basically view him the same. He's going to be involved. So that's a vote of confidence, in my opinion, for Tyjae Spears. And it's really all stemming from their new head coach, Brian Callahan. And you could see as recent as like a week or two ago, Callahan is just hyping up Spears, his route running ability, and then pointing out all the different ways you can get him the ball in the screen game. So that's just a passing game alone. He goes on to talk about how he's interchangeable yet again right here, how he can be a guy who can get at least least 40% of the snaps for Spears. I mean, he played 53% last year. I think he's seeing over 50% this year. And Callahan comes over from the Bengals, who were a top 10 pass rate offense the last 2 years. And the offseason moves of the Titans, signing Tyler Boyd, signing Calvin Ridley, kind of say, yeah, we're probably going to pass the ball more. And I think that only helps the backfield because, one, you'll see more targets for Tyjae Spears, who is great after the catch, and targets in fantasy are worth more than a carry. And if they're going to pass more, maybe be more efficient, they get to the red zone more, which means potentially more touchdowns for the backs. I have Tyjae Spears in the fantasy blueprint as my 108th overall player, slightly ahead of the marker where he goes 109. So we're kind of in the same realm here right now. But here's the big thing. He's going 21 picks after Tony Pollard. After Tony Pollard at this point, the 2 rounds is just crazy in my opinion. Like Blake Corum, Tyjae Spears is a younger, exciting, dynamic back, showed production last year, would maybe see a full workhorse load if Tony Pollard did miss some time. So I think he's a great pick right now. And again, this is the fantasy blueprint, my top 250 rankings. There's a bunch of other stuff in here, key stats, rookie rankings, wants and avoid tiers, all that, team changes. You can check it out, link down below, and join thousands of others who currently have it risk-free, by the way. Now we're going to transition to the NFC, and we're going to go to the wide receiver position for this next guy who is rising a lot up the rankings. And that man's name is Jameson Williams with the Detroit Lions. And outside of Rashod Bateman, he's probably getting like the most hype in camp right now from his coaching staff. And look, this is definitely a good thing. They're saying positive things instead of negative. His own coach, Dan Campbell, according to Coach Speak Index, you can see right here, he pulls some of the clips. This was just like as of a week or two ago. If you said, give me one player that is the most improved this offseason, J-Mo would be that guy right now. And J-Mo is Jameson Williams. Now, it's one thing if it's just one comment, and that comment is pretty reassuring. Maybe they're just trying to get in confidence, but this has been a steady drumbeat this offseason. They want and need to see improvement out of Williams. And the reason is they want to put him in this offense. All the way back in February, this is Coach Speak Index again, you can see right here, Jameson Williams is going to push to be a full-time starter now, basically is what it says right here. So this was before any free agency stuff happened, which basically was kind of a hint that maybe they're not bringing back Josh Reynolds, the veteran receiver. And that's exactly what happened. As you can see from the key changes page here in the fantasy blueprint, they didn't bring back Josh Reynolds. He's gone. He had over 600 yards last year, connection with Jared Goff, and they really didn't replace him. Traquan Smith, a guy who caught no balls in the NFL last year, okay, probably a special teams player, might get cut. And the big one is they didn't draft a rookie receiver. There's a lot of people maybe giving them a second or a third round rookie. They had a second round pick. Would it be a Jalen Polk, a guy who's now with the Patriots? No, they drafted nobody. Jameson Williams isn't in line to start. And this is a big reason why he's rising up some of the rankings, but is he rising up mine? I'm a little bit concerned about the offense he's still in because we already know he doesn't have really any chance to be the wide receiver one outside of an injury. That's Amon-Ra St. Brown, who got the big contract this offseason. And then you see Sam Laporta out there, who was one of the best tight ends in all of football last year with like 120 targets as a rookie. And then, oh yeah, not only that, this team still leans as a run-first offense, and when they're not running the ball, Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back, is also going to be involved in the offense. So now you're getting Jameson Williams as like the third, maybe fourth option in the passing game when they're actually passing, because I think they're still going to lean to run first compared to the rest of the league. So all of this gives me some worry about will Jameson Williams pay off, but maybe we need to look at a little bit more context on what he could do in the Josh Reynolds role. Because last year, like I said, Josh Reynolds in this offense had over 600 yards, and he's nowhere near the talent, you could say athleticism-wise, like Jameson Williams, a former first-round pick, is downfield. So maybe Williams can see like over 800 yards in this offense. And if that's the case, that's where you can see his 10th round price tag maybe paying up. But if I have to be completely honest with you, I'm just not fully there yet because we haven't seen it. And part of that is his rookie year started with him recovering from an injury, and he was kind of like a redshirt year. He didn't really play all that much. And then last year started with him being okay, a little bit limited because of a gambling suspension early on. And then just the breakout of Sam Laporta and Josh Reynolds still being there, he didn't get a lot of snaps. And earlier this offseason, I was fine when he was like a 12th or a 13th round pick. But now over the past couple of weeks alone, he's already rising up to 111th overall, 113th overall. So I'm still 2 rounds behind him right now. There's just other guys who go in this range, who go after him. Curtis Samuel. I mean, Tyler Lockett is here. I know Tyler Lockett's getting older, but now he's going to maybe be in a more pass-first offense with the new offensive coordinator in Seattle, and he's going after Jameson Williams, even though he has proven production. Jacoby Myers, Khalil Shakur, I just like these guys more. And again, this comes down to just the overall offense he's in. Leans run first. Jared Goff's your quarterback and already has to support Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. How much left is there going to be? Now, for the next guy rising up draft boards, I take you to this report right here in Steelers camp because this is like the biggest news coming out of Steelers camp left and right. Russell Wilson continues to like Pat Freiermuth, the tight end. The new quarterback that signed this offseason, Russell Wilson with the Steelers. His favorite target early on is Pat Freiermuth. And Freiermuth is currently going in the 12th round of fantasy drafts, which is kind of a nice place to take your first tight end if you miss out on that like first wave of elite guys in the first 5 or 6 rounds. And if you own Freiermuth last year, you might be frustrated because he had the worst year of his career, but we got to add some more context. Because the fella missed 4 games early on in the season with a hamstring strain, and he's on the injury report for 6 weeks. So like a third of his season was limited by a hamstring, and as somebody who, as recording this right now, is getting over a hamstring injury, they're a bitch. They're annoying. I know I'm not getting all the professional help like an NFL player will be, but there's really not too much you can do to make that thing heal faster if it's going to be a 4 to 6 week recovery. Sure, you can stretch and slowly progress through running, but at the end of the day, that thing is irritated and the muscle fibers are broken. It takes, 4 to 6 weeks. And then the second part of this is he only scored 2 touchdowns. He's now only scored 2 touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. Part of this is the Steelers offensive coordinator and the way that they've ran their offense each of the past few seasons has been absolutely brutal, but they do have a new offensive coordinator there now. And just in general, their quarterback play sucked. They didn't get to the red zone a lot. When they did, they were running the ball. We would hope that he's going to see more than 2 this year. But now the question becomes, will Russell Wilson actually be an upgrade for Mr. Patty F. Pat Freiermuth? And I personally believe yes. I think Russell Wilson is definitely an upgrade from Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph and even Mitch Trubisky, what those guys did last year. And if you just look at raw numbers, he definitely is from an accuracy and efficiency standpoint. Again, he wasn't great, but I believe he is an upgrade. And so is the new offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith. And I know there's a lot of memes out there because during his time with Atlanta, he was public enemy number 1, not playing, the proper tight end usage, the proper running backs with Bijan Robinson, not really running a good offense, keeping Cordell Patterson involved and all these other guys. But before his time in Atlanta, where he was just a head coach, maybe he was dealing with a lot, he was really good as the offensive coordinator in Tennessee from 2019 to 2020. I mean, we saw A.J. Brown have a top 5 wide receiver season there. They were awesome in the run game, awesome off play action. And now he's back to being just an offensive coordinator, not a head coach with the Steelers, can focus on just that run game, which this team is built on, and also getting the tight end involved, the play action game. And I get it. You might say, oh, but Kyle Pitts absolutely stunk with Arthur Smith. Well, I think he stunk based on your expectations of taking him as like a 4th or 5th round pick. He still had like 90 targets last year. And after I said that, I just wanted to double check. He had 89 targets. So 11 targets per game on a team that basically was running the ball at the highest rate in the league, not passing. So like worst case scenario for Kyle Pitts, still ranked 11th in targets. I'm not saying this is what Pat Freiermuth is going to look like, but I'm just saying that if he ranks top 10 in targets, Pat Freiermuth, probably a good year as a 12th round pick. And also we can say that Jonnu Smith, a tight end last year, had one of the most efficient seasons of any tight end in the NFL under Arthur Smith. So in the fantasy blueprint, Freiermuth currently goes as the 134th overall player. He's my 136th overall player. So I think he's properly valued as a 12th round pick right now. And I really don't think he's going to rise all that summer or all that much this summer long. If you wanted to wait later on, I get it, just for the tight end position, punt the guy like Juwan Johnson or some other guys we'll talk about this summer. But I do think this is a solid spot in round 12 to be targeting. And again, if you want to check out the fantasy blueprint, we'll talk more about it later. It's risk-free this year. A couple thousand people have already grabbed it. You can scan the QR code on the screen or click that link in the description below. Now, the next man I want to talk about who's rising up the rankings, and this is for the second straight year. It's his second year in the league, the running back in Jacksonville, and it's Tank Bigsby. And look, his coach is hyping him up, Doug Peterson, once again. And I get it. It's just coach speak that's happening in OTAs in June, but now this is the 3rd time this offseason that Doug Peterson has gone out of his way to say Tank Bigsby needs to see more touches. And if we look at Coach Speak Index on Twitter, it's not necessarily that, oh, Tank Bigsby is so good, because we'll talk about that. He wasn't last year. It's more so that they just don't want to give Travis Etienne a big workload. You can see right here, he had the 3rd most touches in the NFL, Travis Etienne, with 325, and basically just says, this is Doug Peterson, we want to knock a few of those reps down. And he goes on to point out the fact that you can see here, he talks to Matthew Berry, shout out Matthew Berry, points out that, yeah, Tank Bigsby in his second year would be the guy to get some more work. But it doesn't just stop there, because then a month later, he says, we got to get Tank going. Bottom line, he's too good. That's why we drafted him. Okay, so now here's a little bit more talk about the confidence in Tank Bigsby rather than just the fact that by default, we'll give him touches. And then one more time, a couple weeks ago in OTAs, you can see right here, making sure Tank Bigsby gets more opportunities to get out there and take some of the pounding off of Travis Etienne. So Tank Bigsby is going to see some more opportunities this year. It's just a fact of will he actually do anything with them. And this is where I'm a little skeptical, because all this talk is pushing him up some draft boards. It's not anything crazy, a half a round to a round, but still, I'm a little bit skeptical because he was bad last year. Bigsby averages 2.7 yards per touch, had no runs of 10 plus yards, lost 2 fumbles, and dropped 3 of his 4 targets. I mean, it literally was almost as bad as it can get. But the good news is he's getting a lot of hype from his coach. The team didn't add any new running backs, as you can see right here in free agency, just a couple of receivers. Now, they did add a running back in the draft, Keelan Robinson out of Texas, but he's kind of like a special teams type player. Was a running back at Texas, but didn't get a ton of usage with Jonathan Brooks there when he was healthy. He was a late round pick, Keelan Robinson, so I'm not expecting him to be all that involved right away. So the backfield competition is similar to last year. The obvious RB1 is Travis Etienne, and then it's Dearness Johnson and Tank Bigsby, who Dearness Johnson, you might remember, had a couple of big games with the Browns a couple of years back when Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt were missing time, but since then hasn't really done much. Last year, he only averaged like 2.5 yards per carry as well. So all signs point to Tank Bigsby getting the opportunity to maybe see 30, 35, 40% of the snaps. And in his second year, he's going to have to take a step forward. And it's nice to know that he has his coach's support and he's going to see this usage, but I just rather take the guys who have actually produced in the NFL and shown some upside in a similar range, and guys like Ty Chandler, some other guys we talked about in this video, Tyjae Spears, Blake Corum. So even though he's rising up the fantasy rankings in the average draft positions right now, he's the 218th player off the board. I get it. It's a super late pick if you just want to take him, if you like the Jaguars. If you like him as a prospect, sure, but I'm 20 spots difference, 20 spots down, meaning that I think he should go 2 rounds later than he currently does. I don't think that he should be taken ahead of some other guys going here across different positions like Tyler Boyd. I mean, he's going ahead of some other running backs. I would even take Will Shipley, a rookie, ahead of him in Philadelphia, who has a chance to be the RB2 there. All right, now let's move from kind of a janky backup running back to now maybe a janky number 3 receiver on a team. And I say that in all fun and games, but it is Jaylen Tolbert, who is entering his 3rd year in the NFL, and he's actually rising up draft boards right now. Is he rising up my rankings in the blueprint though? Well, let's talk about it. So Tolbert has had a rocky start to his career. There's a lot of hype in 2022 that he would be a starting wide receiver in the offense, and it looked like he was going to get that opportunity until he was just so far behind in OTAs and training camp, only had 3 targets that year, only played and suited up for 8 games, and basically it came out that he just didn't know the playbook, came from a small school in Southern Alabama, but then he actually got the playbook a full off season and he looked better. He said he dedicated himself a lot more, earned 36 targets, started to see a lot more usage. Specifically, his snaps went to 39%, call it 40%, which was like double or triple what they were in his rookie year. So this is a nice progression forward. It's nothing crazy like, oh, this guy's a league winner, but it's a progression forward getting on the field with Dak Prescott in what is a quality offense. And now right now in training camp, Jaylen Tolbert, a lot of positive things is coming out. Another full off season with the team. He was seeing some more usage last year and having success in a chemistry with Dak Prescott, and it's continuing into OTAs, which is a good thing. And as of right now, the only competition will be a late round rookie in Ryan Flowney that was taken, and then last year a late round rookie, I think a 7th round rookie in Jalen Brooks. Kavontae Turpin's there, former USFL player, I believe. He's a special teams guy for them. Jalen Brooks right now seems to be his main competition, at least what we're seeing in OTAs. But I'm not concerned with Jalen Brooks because he really didn't get on the field last year all that much, only had a couple of targets when competing with Jaylen Tolbert last year. And coming out of college, he was not fast, he was not all that dynamic, and in college his best season was about 500 yards. Outside of that, he only had like 100-yard seasons, barely cracking 10 receptions, so like the production history isn't there, the athletic profile, and even last year he didn't really beat out Jaylen Tolbert, who was trending up. So again, right now, maybe this could change, but I'm not too worried about Jalen Brooks. I'm more confident in Jaylen Tolbert. Now here's the facts. He's going as the 84th receiver off the board in fantasy drafts, but am I confident enough to just take a pick on him? Even though he's a late round pick, is that worth it? Well, here's exactly where my hesitation comes in. You get CeeDee Lamb, who's going to make a boatload of money. He's going to push towards a 30% target share. Brandon Cooks is reportedly having a great training camp, and when he got healthy towards the end of last year, he was also producing. So you have these 2 guys ahead of Jaylen Tolbert. Maybe an injury happens to one of them. The aging Brandon Cooks, maybe he gets limited by some sort of hamstring or something. We hope not, knock on wood. That's where Tolbert could see more work. But otherwise, he's pretty set in stone as a wide receiver 3 at this point. I don't think he's overcoming those veterans ahead of him, which means maybe he sees a 12 to 15% target share. That's if a tight end doesn't emerge, which a little bit of a spoiler for future videos, Jake Ferguson, their tight end, he was emerging last year. I think he's a sleeper. So I'm a little bit concerned about the overall opportunity for Tolbert. If you're taking a late round dart throw and hoping for an injury, maybe he's an option. But if you were to scroll through my fantasy top 250 right now, you would notice that something's in there. I don't have any kickers or defenses in here. I don't really care about those positions. They all seem the same to me, in my opinion. Just take them with your last round pick or just pick them up off the waivers. You go all the way through here, I don't have Jaylen Tolbert in here, which means I'd rather have guys like KJ Osborne, who barely makes it. Devontae Walker, the rookie in Baltimore, who barely makes it. Zay Jones, the new Arizona Cardinal. I'd just rather have all these guys, even Tank Bigsby we talked about, who I'm not high on. I'd rather have those guys than one Jaylen Tolbert, the wide receiver 3 for a Dallas team that might actually lean on the run a little bit more this year than they did at times last year. I think they're still going to be a heavily pass-first team, but Tony Pollard was hurt last year. They never really could trust him with a full workload. They didn't really trust Rico Dotto with a full workload, but now Zeke's back, who maybe not is that great, but Jerry Jones trusts him and he knows the offense. So for me right now, the verdict is I'm not really buying this rising of Jaylen Tolbert, who's rising up like 7 or 8 picks almost around. Now, before we get to the next tight end that we have to talk about, I do want to let you know about that fantasy blueprint real quick. I won't waste too much of your time. If you want to grab it, it's completely risk-free, meaning that if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, I just refund any payment that you have to make for it, a one-time payment of $10. You just click this link right here to get access, and then it's going to give you 2 options through our partners. You just follow the simple steps that are laid out right here, and if none of those options work for you, the partners are not available in your location, well, then there's a 3rd option for you down here. And like I said, if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, I just refund that $10, and this is not just for your draft, but every week during the season, I'll be sending you tools via email every single day to help you win your league. So if you want to join the thousands of others and almost 10,000 people now over the years who have accessed this fantasy blueprint to help them make their fantasy playoffs and win their league, well, just click the link in the description below or scan that QR code. And now for that tight end I was talking about, well, it's a tight end room because Darren Waller, right now the reports are that this guy is most likely going to be retiring. It hasn't come out officially yet. They said that a decision is going to be made. Maybe by the time that you're watching this, so that decision has been made, which if he retires, that's going to impact Daniel Bellinger, Jack Stoll, but more so the rookie and Theo Johnson. Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger will see an uptick, and that's why they're slightly rising up the rankings right now. Now, for a summary, Waller hasn't participated in OTAs. The team hasn't heard from him, and you've probably seen it on Twitter. It's gone around as a meme. He's released a rap video, a full-on video. Honestly, like the production on the video is pretty dang good. I don't know about the lyrics as much, but this is kind of where his attention is right now. And I would just like to say this. If he does retire, I think that we just don't give these guys their flowers flowers enough, we just make a meme out of them trying to pursue some other interests like music, which I personally think is cool. But let's not forget that Darren Waller overcame a lot of things and hardships in his life to return to football and become a pretty productive to really productive tight end in 2019 out of nowhere, where he has over 1,100 yards, follows that up when people are saying, oh, he's just a one-hit wonder, goes out there and has a 1,200-yard season the next year, and then some injuries derailed his career. So let's give the guy his flowers and go forward with the assumption that if he retires, those other tight ends are going to benefit. And let's talk about these other tight ends. We can start with Daniel Bellinger, who is somebody that in the past has had the opportunity to be a starter 2 years ago during his rookie year. And a lot of things were going right for him. Across just 12 games, he had 30 catches as a rookie, which isn't all that bad. And then you factor in that he missed 5 games. I believe at this point, something happened with like his eye socket, like he couldn't even see. He had to get some sort of surgery, which impacted him for like half the season. He was productive and used in a lot of creative ways, especially in the red zone. And just a reminder, Bellinger's still just 23, entering his 3rd year. He's a great athlete. And now that takes us to, and we can move over to the next tight end who should benefit, and that's the 4th round rookie in Theo Johnson out of Penn State that they just drafted this past draft season a couple of months ago. And when you look at Theo Johnson's stat log in his college career at Penn State, nothing's going to be, oh my God, this is so impressive, I need that guy. Because as you can see right here, the dude never topped 340 yards in the season, which isn't all that great, but there's a lot of context that has to go into this. Penn State had a lot of great tight ends. In 2020, he was competing with Pat Freiermuth. In 2021 and 2022, he was also competing with another tight end in Mr. Brenton Strange. And maybe you don't remember Brenton Strange all that much, but he was drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars last year, not in like the 6th, 7th, or 5th round, as a 2nd round pick. A 2nd round pick, but he didn't get a lot of usage because Evan Ingram was there. So it wasn't until 2023 that Theo Johnson got to be the guy, and in that season, well, Penn State ranked 79th in passing per game, and their quarterback wasn't all that great in Drew Allar. So all this context matters, and now let's actually show you exactly where Theo Johnson wins. He's an incredible blocker, his catch radius is large, and he's a great athlete. And I want to double down on this great athlete piece because as you can see right here in the player profile or workout metrics, at the combine, he just blew every single thing away. The #1 tight end athlete in this class, one of the best athletes we've ever seen for his size. He ran his speed score 98th percentile, burst score 96th percentile, catch radius, like we said, is great, 98th percentile, all this percentile stuff, all this math stuff, basically the closer to 100 percentile, the best. 100 percentile is the best of all time, basically, in that category. So all this is great, but we have to keep the expectation that it's really tough for rookies, especially 4th round rookies, to find success right away, and he's not entering an amazing offense, an amazing quarterback, or anything like that, and Daniel Bellinger, and as of right now, Darren Waller is still there. But this team did give Daniel Bellinger the opportunity 2 years ago as a rookie to be the starter, and he found some success, so maybe there's a chance for Theo Johnson. Now, all of this said, these are like ancillary tight ends who are not in like this wacky or situation with not a great offense in quarterback. So I personally am just saying, like, I'd rather take anybody else. Just give me Juwan Johnson, give me Jake Ferguson, give me guys, Taysom Hill if he's still a tight end at this point, getting running back snaps in camp, then rely on the New York Giants tight end room. But I do have to point out that they are rising right now. The reason is that Waller's probably going to retire. If I had to pick a guy right now, it would be Daniel Bellinger, but in like dynasty leagues, Theo Johnson becomes more appealing. So these are 10 guys that are currently skyrocketing up the fantasy rankings, and I'll continue to make these videos once a month, and after we get like preseason and training camp and a bunch of news that comes out, and basically say, should he be drafting this guy? The hype's getting there. Is it worth it? Is it not? And we'll break it all down. Now, we talked about some guys in this video that just aren't worth it. I'm still avoiding. And if you want to see the guys, the top 10 guys who I'm currently avoiding the most at their current ADP, well, you can check out this lovely video right over here. And if you're not already and you made it to the end, take 2 seconds to subscribe to this channel. It really helps the channel go a long way. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.